Alrighty, hello everyone. We are so excited to be here with Alvaro Perpuly, who is the Director of Communications for Representative Frederica Wilson, for our last day in Washington, D.C. and the last day of our trip. It has been a long time coming. We thought the trip would never end, the coast-to-coast journey, but it is, and we're so excited to end with a bang, starting with you. How are you doing today?
Good. Thank you for having me.
Of course. Wanna go ahead and get right into it, and sort of have you introduce yourself, a little bit about your role, what hats you've worn, and a little bit of that nature.
So like I said, my name's Alvaro, like you said, and I'm the communications director for Congresswoman Frederica Wilson, who represents Miami, Florida. And essentially my role and title is I oversee all her speeches, all her public statements, interactions with the press, and social media. So anything that kind of she is amplifying or we are putting out, I oversee all of that. And in previous roles, I've been in Miami politics and Florida politics all my life, have worn multiple different hats in the campaign field and the government field, and super excited to be now here in DC, working in Congress, doing this work, but for a place also that I call home, from Miami, from DC.
And you seem pretty young. How did you get into that role, this seemed high-level role, so quickly?
Yeah, I started out in I, since a young age, knew I wanted to be in politics. I think my dad used to always tell me to read the newspaper and kind of raise me on that mentality. I think he didn't mean that much in terms of a career path. He just kind of raised me to read newspapers.
Yeah.
And, it became clear from a very young age that there's a lot of problems this nation faces and that I want to be, engaged. And I saw politics as a mean to get engaged in the process, at least for me, not the only way, and just fell right into it. In my politics, starting with knocking on doors and doing field outreach, more on the campaign trail, to eventually climbing my way up to Miami politics, Florida politics, and now into my current role as communications director for Frederica Wilson, which has been a great privilege and honor to do every day.
And so on our journey, we've talked to a lot of 18 to 25-year-olds, specifically about social media and its impact. You mentioned that you oversee social media for Frederica Wilson, but I'm curious about the things that you see, if you think it's a good tool that people can use regarding politics, or if it can be kind of detrimental to what people are seeing, especially with voter education and people getting misinformation and things like that.
It's absolutely a great tool. It's obviously the double-edged sword, as in the sense that there are going to be people on social media that are going to spread misinformation, are going to mischaracterize things. But at the end of the day, that is where people are at. People are on, Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, Twitter, you name it. They're just on it. And there's no way around it, whether you like it or not. There are, obviously bad sides of social media, but we need to be making sure that we're amplifying our message, get out the vote, making sure people are aware of what's at stake this election, what's happening, and inform them with the right tools and things they need to know going into this election. And that's where people are at. And at the end of the day, we need to be able to find ways to communicate to young people about why this election matters and why they need to be engaged and why they need to vote. And, we obviously, there's, again, like you mentioned, all these different things in social media. They are bad things, but at the end of the day, we need to be doing our part to fight back the lies, fight back the disinformation, make sure we're providing the right information, and that we're engaging with young people, because that's where a lot of them are. And, we need to make sure that we're meeting them where they're at and not trying to, stay away from it.
Mm-hmm.
And you mentioned sort of this idea of encouraging individuals of why they need to vote. Curious as to why. What is it in you that's the impetus for saying, hey, I need to vote, and not only I need to vote, I need to encourage others to also get out and vote?
Well, I think we say every election is going to be the most important election ever, but I think this election in particular is just, the most important and consequential election we've ever faced. When you have the two candidates, a president, and you have Donald Trump on the ballot, who is, convicted felon, impeached, try to overturn the election, try to do all these crazy things, and on top of that is pushing out different policies that, restricts everyday freedoms, from abortion to LGBTQ rights, that, gives tax breaks and handouts to the wealthy, and just undercuts a lot of the progress we've made in the past couple of years. This election really could be a make or break for our democracy, a make or break for our country. As someone who's publicly said he'll be a dictator on day one, who has put out things like Project 2025, which is a 920-page draconian plan that essentially outlines what he would do when he enters office, and it involves everything from gutting checks and balances, absorbing a lot of power into the presidency to seek revenge on political enemies. It's not based on anything constitutional. It's not based on anything that I think everyday Americans want. People at the end of the day want to see their cost of living to go down. They want their freedoms being protected. And that's what we've seen under this president, under a Democratic leadership, lowering everyday costs, protecting freedoms. And that's really the choice I think a lot of voters have to make. And it's a really, precarious and important election because we just can't, no one wants to see this democracy and this experiment. And this election is just really important for people to go out and vote and, raise their opinion and make their voices heard.
Yeah, and we've spoken with a lot of people that either believe this or they've heard, their peers, people in their community say, it's the candidates are not good options. I don't even want to vote. And so, our message and what people have said is you got to encourage them to still, fight and use their voice and still continue to vote. But how do you do that?
I would say, really, I know that, some people don't like the candidates that we have right now, but you have to look at it this way. I think there's two ways to look at it. One, a presidency is not just about who's at the top of the ticket, it's about the entire team they put together.
Yeah.
And under this administration, they have rolled out countless policies that are good policies. And, it's not everything, and I know that. And I know everyone in this room wants better. Everybody in this room wants more. And there are just constraints to how, the way government functions and how much, we can do. But, under a Democratic administration, we've been able to see at least, we've been able to see we can fight to protect reproductive rights as much as we can. We can fight to protect LGBTQ rights as much as we can. Under this president, he signed the infrastructure bill. He has worked to sign LGBTQ marriage equality into law, which the Supreme Court does, so we don't have a Supreme Court gutting it. He has been able to advance the most climate ambitious agenda in history. And look, this is only some of the things. Obviously, everyone wants more. Everyone wants different things. But take that and put that aside. And would you rather have someone who's going to, immediately try to support banning abortion nationwide, immediately, reverse all the different climate policies, and, just, when you think about our allies in the world, just kind of push them aside and be like, they don't matter anymore. And just all the different things, cancel people, student loan cancellation, reversing all that as well. There's just so many things that are on the line, and, I do sympathize with people who don't, love the candidates right now. But the fact of the matter is we have to stay focused on what are the issues at stake this election. And there's a lot at stake that are beyond, obviously people have opinions on the personality and styles of each of the candidates, but we have to look at the policies at the end of the day, because that's what's going to end up mattering. That's what's going to end up, affecting my pocketbook, affecting your pocketbook. That's going to affect the freedoms. At the end of the day, I don't want to sit here a year from now talking about how every state has banned abortion now, how marriage equality has been rolled back, how, we're seeing handles so wealthy, how we're seeing, guts on checks and balances. I don't want to sit and have that conversation a year from now. But that's frankly the truth if people don't go out to vote and people don't engage in this election, because that's really what's at stake this election.
If we could zoom out for a second, focusing on your role in DC, what does a day in the life of a communications director look like?
Yeah, so I usually wake up every day at 6 a.m. and I start reading the news for about 2 to 3 hours.
Wow.
So my party trick usually is like any weekday I could probably cite to any headline of any major news outlets.
Oh my goodness.
So, and I'm looking at every single national and for us at least Florida news.
This is all reading or some watching, some podcast.
But you have like several screens
yeah,
up at once.
I wish that my dream is to kind of just have you see in the newsrooms they have like 6 different TVs. No, it's mostly just I wake up on my computer and just am going and scrolling through the news, and it helps me prepare for the day to see what, especially dealing with press, seeing what his concerns are out there, to both flag for the congresswoman what's coming and what's important, to give me a pulse of what people are talking about, but also to catch some of the stories that aren't told. And I try to make an effort to make sure that we're, at least for the Congresswoman, we like to uplift racial justice stories and things that affect Black voters. That's something she's very passionate about. We like to uplift education. She's an educator. And just talk, and she's someone who likes to fight the good fight and fights things that people aren't talking about sometimes, even if it just isn't in the media. So, I'm also looking for what's the story that isn't being talked about enough. So in these 2 or 3 hours, I'm reading the news, everything from local, states, and national, international news, kind of getting it all and taking it all in. And from there, kind of going to the office. And every day and every week is different. A lot of it changes based on the news cycle. 1 week I'm dealing with abortion, next week I'm dealing with something Republicans are doing. It truly varies what ends up happening, what my weeks look like. Some of it's going to be reactionary to whatever the news is talking about. But also, we don't, our agenda is not driven by the news. The news has their priorities, and they're obviously looking for clicks and things like that. And, they're an important role, but we also have to drive our agenda and talk about those issues that aren't being talked about, that maybe the media is overlooking. So, also looking for us ways to message both short-term and long-term about the issues that we care about and that everyday people care about. And, also preparing for the Congresswoman's planned events that she has, whether she has a press conference she's already planned for to attend, a public speaking event in Miami, or, a rally of sorts, things that we can plan ahead on, making sure we're on top of that and engaging with those things. And then also making sure we have a constant social media presence, and that we're talking about things that are important to everyday people, and that we're messaging properly and effectively every day. So that's kind of, in terms of how it ends up translating tangibly, it means writing and editing speeches, writing and editing op-eds, writing statements, speaking to the press one-on-one, talking to them about what we're looking at, what we're hearing, and what trying to pitch our message to the press. And also just keeping your eyes open for things and making sure that the Congresswoman has everything she needs to be prepared for the day. She has a lot of people, she is a very busy person, is trying to do her best, and has a lot of people who want to talk to her. So making sure that she has all the tools she needs to be effective as a member of Congress, whether that's the votes she's taking, whether it's the engagement she's doing, and making sure she's just as prepared and as sharp as she could be. And so that's a lot of what my role entails, making sure she's prepared, and also that we're messaging accordingly to what we're doing. So, and my job in particular doesn't lend itself easily to a 9 to 5, because if there's breaking news on a Saturday, that means I'm working on a Saturday. If there's something going on, this weekend I've had reporters been calling me on the 4th of July, the 5th, the 6th, and it's that's just the nature of the job, and it takes a lot of work, but it's good work that we're doing, and I don't question it for 1 second. And I know the Congresswoman is working hard every day as well alongside me, and it's not like it's just me and she's not doing anything. She's also putting her part. We're all as a team, working as best as we can to navigate the current times, and it's only gonna get busier because we are really at a pivotal moment in our history. So we need to be engaged every single day, and that's how we have to look at it.
And is this what you love doing? Do you see yourself staying in kind of the communication space, or is this kind of a stepping stone for you to get somewhere else in the future?
Frankly, I'm not sure. I think right now my focus is on the mission. I really love the work I'm doing right now. It's an important moment. And I think right now the House of Representatives and Congress has a lot of important issues at hand we're dealing with. And so, I'm happy where I am, and I really love what I do. What this means long-term for me, not sure exactly yet how that means. But I know, for a while I'm going to be doing something impactful. And I think for a while I want to be in this field of politics of government in the service of helping people. That's what I see as my purpose. That's what I hope to continue doing. What that entails for me in the future, I'm not 100% sure. But I love the work I get to do every day, and it's a privilege to be able to do it.
And in being around a lot of public servants or politicians for a lot of the day, whether it be Representative Frederica Wilson or other politicians, what would you say is the most misunderstood thing about what they do. I guess a lot of citizens get frustrated. They're like, they're not serving me, they're serving themselves, all of that stuff. So maybe could you shed some light on?
Yeah. So one of my favorite sayings on politics is, it is neither as good nor as bad as you think it is. And the reason I like that a lot is I think a lot of people, paint politics as a dirty sport, and it gets the realm of dirty sport. And don't get me wrong, I do think there are bad actors in politics, but I do think there are a lot of good actors in politics who are trying to really their best to do the good thing under constraints of a system that just doesn't allow for you to wave a magic wand and protect abortion nationwide today, or cancel all student led today. There are constraints, and there are different politics at play, and politicians I think often have to make imperfect choices where either one is not going to be perfect. Either situation is going to either hurt them right now or hurt them long term. They kind of have to choose, or so. I think politics gets a bad rep just because I think people always think people are out for the wrong interests, or for money and special interests. Which, don't get me wrong, I think there are politicians who are in that realm, but I think there's also a lot of good people in politics really trying to do their best in a system that doesn't have perfect choices. And I think a lot of politicians are really just trying to fight the good fight, and you're just in an imperfect system. You can't do everything every day. If you think you're running for Congress and are going to change the world every day, you're going to get a world of wind hitting you when you enter Congress, because it's not. And for me, I think it's the little wins that make a big difference in keeping me going, because I think it is frustrating. I think we as political staff feeling frustrated that we can't get the big ones that we want to. That we for instance, we're seeing abortion being rolled back in states, and as a member of Congress, it's hard for, as one member of Congress, it's hard for to do anything. As an individual myself, it's hard for us to do everything. The best we can do is do our part and do our part in trying to support the causes. But at sometimes it's hard based on constraints. So I think that's a big misconception. I think a lot of voters don't trust politicians, and I think there have been politicians who have led to that opinion and have made people doubt their faith. But I think again there are a lot of good people in politics trying to do their best, and just working under confinements of a political system, a system that isn't perfect, and it's designed imperfectly. And until I'm a big believer in reform things. So even just thinking from a voter level, we don't have same-day voter registration. We don't have early voting in every state. We don't have a national election day. Even just thinking at that level, there's a lot of room for improvement, and there's a lot of room for improvement in a lot of different ways. But it does take time. It does take effort. Nothing happens overnight, and I would just hope people focus on the long game. That there's a lot of people really trying to do the good work.
Well, I'm the last question I have. It's sort of, I guess, leads into how you ultimately got into this political space, and I like to call it like a watershed moment. What was a moment for you early on that sort of was a point of realization that led you into the path of wanting to work with public servants and wanting to work on framing a message that can go out? That's sort of how I see like communications. You are framing the narrative that allows for the most effective way of pushing an agenda, if that's a fair framing.
Yeah. I think there's been two moments. I think one has been, I was working on a 2020 campaign for Danielle Living-Gavo, who was running for Miami County Mayor at the time, and I was in the campaign, and she is a public servant I've admired for a long, long time. She is someone who, fought in the nonprofit industry and, non-public office for 40 years, just doing the good work with no recognition at all. Ran for county commission with not much public support, and she defied the odds and unseated a sitting commissioner, which at the time was unheard of in Miami-Dade County politics. And, she kept doing the good work, and at the time she was kind of known as a progressive, like a staunch progressive that was like a hippie, too radical, and she would always make the tough votes and vote her conscience and do what was right, and different moments supposed it was politically convenient, and people got to know her for that. And then she decided one day to run for county mayor. That the county had been governed by Republican politics for too long. She decided to put her hand in the ring. And first off, she wasn't going into the race. She wasn't the star Democratic candidate, nor was she the star candidate in general. But she is one of the most hardworking ladies I've ever met. She wakes up around, say, 5 a.m., starts working, and she's usually up till 12 or 1 a.m. every day. And she's working hard. She has her schedule back to back to back to back, every second of the day booked. She is taking meetings, and she is someone who really loves connecting with people at core, and she will talk to anyone. She's not someone to think of herself too highly to where she can't talk to like regular people. She will talk to everyone, level with them, and really show empathy. And I think to see a person like that defy all the odds, keep fighting, keep working, just doing the hard work and doing the good work, and then eventually win in the 2020 election, where she became the first female mayor of Miami-Dade County and first Democratic mayor, and so many over a decade. And not just a Democrat, but a progressive at that point. It was really a watershed moment, showing like the power of what people can do, the power of what hard work can do. Obviously, I wish to say that it happened more often in politics, and it doesn't necessarily. To be frank, I don't want. But that is, it takes a lot of work to make things happen, and that was one moment that showed me like, hard work and dedication does pay off at times. There are times, obviously, where it's tough, but it does work out a lot. So I think that's number one in terms of just policy in general and having a people-driven movement. As that campaign was people-driven. And I would say, the second one, I think, in terms of more specifically communication, Robin Williams once said, words and ideas can change the world. I think that's a paraphrase, but and
you said Robin Williams, so that got me already. I was
he's quite the man. And when you think about, I used to actually be a person who used to think like poorly of communications. I used to think, because in government there's always like, there's a legislative track and there's a communications track. It seems like there's those two tracks. And I always used to think of myself, especially growing up, as a policy wonk. Like I knew everything at the policy level, and I always thought, we need to be focusing on policy, doing all these things. But at the end of the day, you cannot, you frankly, as you have as great policies as you can have and want, but if you can't communicate effectively those policies to the people and get them to agree, those great policies mean absolutely nothing, which is a sad truth. But, there's a reason Trump won in the first place. He was a great communicator. He's obviously not a great, leader in terms of how he governs, in terms of his policies. But he knows how to get to people's skin. He knows how to get people going. And he's been a great communicator in that sense, and there's no doubting it. Despite all his terrible policies and despite every terrible thing he says, he knew how to message, and that got him into the presidency. And I think, especially in a core moment like right now, where we have a lot of good policies as Democrats to run on. We have a lot of good things that we need to be messaging on. And at such an important time, it's important that we message this out and, talk about what we're doing, talk about the two different paths forward, talk about what's at stake. And at the end of the day, it's going to be, people obviously like to hear from politicians and I guess political staffers, but at the end of the day, there's only so much we could do. It's also going to take everyday stories from everyday people to talk about how the cancellation of their student debt really saved them and let them buy a house. It's going to take stories about people who maybe have experienced sexual assaults and really, appreciated that there were abortion laws in place to help save them, or maybe not. It's going to take everyday stories to motivate people, because that's what moves people. So we're going to do the best we can as, in the public service realm and government to communicate. But it's going to take more than that. It's going to take everyday people to tell their story, to really communicate their story and show how it affects people on an everyday level, because that's how we're going to win this election. That's how we're going to get people to vote. It's not by, showing a spreadsheet of numbers or things like that. It's by, telling everyday stories and how there are real impacts to the policies being implemented. There are real impacts to what people in government are doing. We're not just people who sit in Capitol Hill and do, legislation. There's real impacts, and it trickles down. And I think that's the message, we need to be telling everyday stories.
Wow.
Well, yeah, that was awesome. We thank you so much for your time and all your perspectives, your knowledge, background, everything. It was really amazing hearing from you today and getting a chance to meet you. We wish you the best of luck as you continue with your role here in DC and beyond. And yeah, we're super appreciative of your time today.
No, of course, thank you. Thank you for what you're doing, traveling the nation. It seems like you've been busy all over.
Yes, but this is the last day, so we have work to continue to do ahead of the 2024 election. But I think one of the biggest things you said, it's going to take everyday stories from everyday people, and this is what that is. So thank you for sharing.
No, of course. Thank you.